What's going on, everybody? This is Clydian Fair. Let's talk about Wartales Bow Boy Edition. Boy builds, bow builds edition. Yes. Over the course of me creating Wartales content, I've gotten a few requests just asking about basic build information and what my recommendations are. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dig into the archer builds that I have for you. As a quick side note, for attributes that I recommend putting into archers, I recommend putting points into dexterity, movement, and critical hit chance. Willpower is also very useful. I recommend having at least 12 willpower, pumping up movement as much as you possibly can because archers are very slow innately, and then increasing critical hit chance and dexterity to deal more damage. Now, that being put off to the side, and now that we've covered that, there are a few things to note that I really dislike for these specializations, and I feel like they should remove. They should not have Valorous Audacity for the archer. You should never be putting your archer next to an enemy unit ever. There's no melee abilities for an archer once you're actually pulled into combat and engaged upon, so there should never be Valorous Audacity even as an option. I think it's a terrible thing for an archer, and no one should ever take it. Another thing that I really want to complain about is Beastmaster. Beastmaster as a subclass just feels very weak unless you're doing a specific gimmick type of run through where you have multiple beasts or animals of any way, shape, or form on the battlefield, and the only way to actually utilize it is if you have 4 or more animals that are surrounding an enemy, and then Beastmaster becomes good. So for your solo archer runs and you just have a ton of animals, this is great, but for most other runs, Beastmaster just falls short. And now that I've talked about those particular complaints of mine for the archer specializations, let's go ahead and dig into the first build. Now, the first build is a build that I primarily am going to be using as a debuff and damage output potential unit. It utilizes zone of control quite a bit. So first things first, we're going to grab Valor's Victory, so it will generate more Valor points upon kills. And what's going to help it get kills is going to be the subclass of Infantrymen. Infantrymen is very amazing with Barrage. You put down a cone of control, essentially, and whenever an enemy unit walks into the cone, you attack with an attack of opportunity on it, and it does decent amount of damage. And not only is it the first enemy, but it's the first 3 enemies that walk through that cone per turn. Upon upgrade, it goes to 4. It's not necessarily to really upgrade this because by the time you have 3, 4 plus attacks, generally it's already been around. At level 5, we're going to be grabbing Precision. Now, this could be replaced with Reinforced Arrows. The way Precision works is every 2 attacks you apply Vulnerability. Whenever a unit that has Vulnerability gets hit by an attack, it's an instant crit and it does a lot of damage. When it's upgraded, it does even more stuff. Next up, we have Thrill of the Hunt. So each attack executes at a range of 8 meters or further, generates 1 rage, and rage increases your damage output by 5%. So in other words, if your archer is further back than 8 meters, you start actually dealing more damage consecutively. And then finally, we have Lone Wolf. So as long as you're not near enemies or allies and they're at least 5 meters away, you're going to have a damage buff, and not only damage buff, but a reduced incoming damage. So it all in all, this Infantryman bow build is really about dealing the most damage that you possibly can, generating rage to increase your damage output by being further away. Upon upgrade, the Thrill of the Hunt is a 6-meter radius. Upon upgrade, the Lone Wolf gives you not only a damage increase, but damage reduction. And upon upgrade, Precision also generates Fury every 2 attacks, as well as apply Vulnerability. So altogether, every 2 attacks from a range, this bowman will not only deal critical hits, but will do massive damage from all of the rage generation, and you'll see that it really starts adding up. Moving on from our first build, we're going to go into our second build. Our second build is going to be kind of similar to the first build, except you use Reinforced Arrows instead of Precision. Now, what this means is that we're still going to be taking Barrage. We're going to be using Valorous Support instead of Valorous Victory. So those two are pretty interchangeable with this build, and And so not only will you be using your cone of control to deal damage, you're still a lone wolf, so you still have the 10% damage increase and 10% damage reduction when you're 5 meters away from people. Reinforced arrows upon upgrade. Every time this unit lands a critical hit, they apply bleeding, and it also increases critical damage by 35%. So it's a very strong ability. And then we are also taking Thrill of the Hunt, which will generate 2 rage, which essentially gives you a 10% damage bonus every time that you attack from 6 meters or further, and it does stack. So after, 1 full barrage, you're looking at a lot of damage output. And finally, for our last bow build here, we are going to be doing a slight different approach here. We're going to be taking the Hunter subclass, which will give you a slowdown arrow, which is recoil shot. It basically knocks someone back and then applies slowdown. Very useful for champions as well as basically anything else. Getting it knocked back will trigger area of effect attack of opportunities, such as the spearmen and or the archer's barrage from the infantrymen. We are also going to be grabbing Beast Mastery. Now, Beast Mastery is different from Beast Master. Beast Mastery, whenever you have a animal in your group, lets you control the animal as a regular unit. And if you don't have this or a bacon collar, the animal runs rampant and does whatever it wants to do. This just gives you a little bit of control over things. Now, a nice replacement for this, if you're not doing an animal run, would simply to be used like reinforced arrows or precision. Both of those are good. Reinforced arrows, if you're building a crit build, is just better. And finally, we are going to be taking Animal Affinity and then Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf we've already covered. Lone Wolf, in my opinion, is the best high-end specialization you can have for an archer. I'm not a huge fan of second weapon. I feel like it's just too situational. And now if you're building a very gimmicky build, it's very useful. And anticipation, honestly, I should never have my archers anywhere near enemy units, so there should never be an opportunity for an enemy to attack me. Therefore, I find anticipation quite useless. Animal Affinity, at the start of the battle, this gains 2 allied animal passive skills upon upgrade, so this can easily be replaced by Thrill of the Hunt if you don't have any animals. If you do have animals, Animal Affinity, it's nice. It's just a nice flavor thing to have. It's not a necessity, so I don't use Taming Arrow because, quite frankly, it only applies Fury to the targeted animal, and if you're not running animals, then you don't really need it. Anyway, guys, that sums up those 3 basic archer builds. I don't really dig into too much on the actual animal controlling or anything like that in this video or in general, because I primarily don't use animals in my Wartales videos or runs in general. I'm not a huge fan of animals. I find them to be kind of a pain. There are some fun gimmick runs to utilize them, but when it comes down to most standard runs, I just don't use animals. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got. So if you like this video and would like to see more content such as this in the future, like the video, drop a comment, make that number go up. And until next time, have a good one.